Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrell, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology podcast, sponsored by Upskill HR and ACE the HR exam. This podcast is part of a series on the Workology podcast that is focused on the roles and responsibilities of the CHRO. That's the Chief Human Resources Officer. The CHRO is sometimes called the SVP of HR or the Chief People Officer. It's a executive or C-level role that deals with managing human resources, as well as with organizational development and implementing policies of change to improve the overall efficiency of the company. The CHRO podcast series here on Workology is powered by Ginger.com. One of the reasons I wanted to do this series is because there have been so many mysteries and questions around that CHRO role. And I want aspiring CHROs to know what types of skills and experiences they need to promote into that role in the future, along with hearing from senior HR leadership and our peers about how they're partnering and collaborating. What programs are they working on? Today, I'm joined by Deb Hill. She's the Vice President of HR for FM Systems. Deb leads the HR function and oversees culture, people, and talent strategy for the company. She has been a talent leader for over 15 years with a strong focus on leading and scaling talent acquisition for rapidly growing technology companies. Deb joined FM Systems in 2018 and immediately began transforming and building the company's HR processes around finding and hiring talented people, employee engagement, and total employee rewards. During Deb's tenure with the company, FM Systems has grown from under 100 employees, primarily in one location, to over 200 employees in the U.S., UK, and Bulgaria, a global organization. Deb, welcome to the Workology podcast.
Thank you, Jessica. It's so great to be here.
You've worked in HR leadership in a variety of industries for the past 15 plus years. How did your early experience lead you to your current role?
Yeah, thank you so much for this opening question. So what I'll share is that while I have worked in the HR and talent space for over 20 years, I like to tell people and like to say that I'm really on my third career. So and that I've really finally found the right home. So my first career out of college involved marketing and operations work in the insurance industry, which I found to be extremely kind of gray and boring. And then my second career involved a number of years spent working on the agency side of recruiting. And it's really that experience that ultimately led me to where I'm at today. So, while working on the agency side of recruiting, what struck me the most as I was working with my customers and candidates was that many of the clients I supported lacked really strong internal support from HR and recruiting, right? That's ultimately why they were reaching out to me and using me. And so I'd place a candidate at one of my clients and only to have them leave a year or two later because they weren't seeing the career growth that they were looking for, or their training and onboarding was just a mess, and they're leaving 6 months after placement. So seeing that, it really was my desire to be able to have a more of an impact on that total employee life cycle. And that's ultimately what drew me to this, what I call my third career, which is HR leadership in technology companies. And, it's really the experience that I had as an agency recruiter, where I was, really developing deep business partnership skills and chatting with hiring managers across a variety of different companies that ultimately, I think helped me in my current role. So you can't effectively support leaders and teams as an HR and talent leader if you don't have kind of that innate curiosity and business acumen that really, to really dive into what those teams do day in and day out.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to ask, even though I feel like you kind of already started to answer this question, but let's dive in a little bit more.
Yep.
What skills and experience do you believe are absolute requirements for the CHRO role, especially thinking maybe about someone who's listening that is just starting out in our industry?
Yeah. So again, another great question. I think, when I think about the skills for a successful leader of people, one thing that I'll say is that I'm not big on kind of call it absolute requirements. So, I believe that every person has kind of a unique set of experiences and skills that could translate well into, any number of roles. But a couple of things really stand out for me as important in a leadership role in terms of people. So one is really strong internal and external communication skills. You're the voice of the people, both internally as well as externally. Over the past 18 months, what's really become apparent for me is it's important for HR leaders to have empathy. I think the best HR leaders that I know balance that kind of that empathy and the connectedness with their employees, with ultimately the business priorities and kind of the realities of today's, really competitive market. So, today's HR leader is so much more of a business strategist, specifically around the people side of things, but they're responsible for kind of that intersection of leadership and culture and career development and employee engagement. You asked about, what's important for those just starting out in the industry. And what I'd say there is, I really believe that, a strong HR partner will come with a variety of exposures to kind of all aspects of HR, so talent acquisition, learning and development, operations, but that person will never lose sight of the business. So if you're early in your career, and you don't know how to read a financial statement, right? Take classes on financial statements, learn about sales strategy, spend time with operational leaders. So really, take an active role, not just in kind of honing your HR skill sets, but in really learning and understanding the business.
One of the things I wanted to have you talk about is just what it has been like working during a global pandemic for you, your company, and your team.
Yeah. So I feel like that's something that I could talk about for forever, because it really has been so different from I think anything any of us have experienced. So it's been exciting, it's been challenging, it's been emotional, it's been successful. For our company specifically, I'm really proud of kind of the way our employees pulled together. So FM Systems is a software company, and the products that we sell, it's a suite of digital solutions, and it's in workplace management, employee experience, workplace analytics. It really helps large companies, like think enterprise level companies, manage their office space at a very simplistic level. And so think about that. Think about April of 2020 when the world kind of went dark and everybody left office spaces to go work from home. And so really over the course of the pandemic, as a company, we had to pivot and adjust our messaging and strategy, away from kind of this space and occupancy and towards creating safer workspaces and planning for implementing, more of an employee-centric workplace as people started coming back to the office. And so as a company, we couldn't have done that without the hard work and dedication of our employees. Personally, and for the HR team, It's been a really challenging 18 months. I'm sure you've talked to other HR leaders about this. So many different aspects that have kind of come into play, right? So worrying about the health and safety of really our entire global workforce and their families, implementing new policies to kind of accommodate a more flexible schedule to support parents, new mothers, fathers as they're dealing with homeschooling, and then also being aware of how like the whole remote work experience might affect some of our employees negatively, both emotionally and mentally, and then trying to put in place programs that encourage and support connection across the organization, even when that workforce is fully distributed. So it's been, like I said, it's been challenging and exciting, and no day has been different. But I think overall, I feel like it's been personally rewarding as well as professionally rewarding.
Awesome. Well, I think everyone listening is probably shaking their heads in unison saying, yes, no day is ever the same. It has been a challenge, but we have really rose to the challenge. And I see so many HR teams and organizations flourishing in spite of what's happening, and employees in some cases more engaged and happier than ever, whether they're in person, hybrid, or remote.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great time to be in HR, because never kind of in the history of as long as I've been in HR have we kind of been really on the forefront of strategy across the organization.
And I feel like that stuff changes on the daily basis, if not multiple times a day.
Yep, absolutely.
When we spoke previously on our prep call, you had mentioned that you worked with an external consultant for DEI training. Can you tell us how you selected a consultant and maybe what the scope of training has been?
Yeah, so as a smaller company, right, you referenced at the beginning, we've got 200 employees across the 200 plus employees across the globe. What was really most important to us was that we selected a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting company who would really meet us where we were at in our journey. So as a company, we had taken steps really during, call it, the previous couple of years to focus initially on increasing representation of females in our employee as well as management population. So in particular, as a technology company, technology companies tend to lean, more heavily white and male. So we kind of, our first step was, how can we increase representation of females within the company? And I think to a large extent, we've done a good job, not a great job there. But what we hadn't done yet was really a great job of also being more focused on increasing diversity through the lens of race and ethnicity. And kind of some of that started to, right, we started to think more about that during 2020 with George Floyd and all of kind of the conversations that came out as a result of that. And so we were really grappling with, how do we talk more openly about race and privilege amongst our leadership teams as well as with employees. And so we ultimately, we selected a consultant who we felt comfortable with, who understood that we were on a journey and that we were kind of really at the beginning of the journey, and who would work within the confines of our budget as well. So what we did is we scoped out an initial training for our senior leadership team around privilege, around inclusion, around equity, and we'll have eventual follow-on services from this consultant as we progress in our journey.
Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller-Merrell, and you are listening to the Workology podcast sponsored by Upskill HR and ACE the HR exam. We're talking about the CHRO role with Deb Hill. She's the VP of HR for FM Systems. This podcast series on Workology is powered by Ginger.com and New Manager Training, powered by Workology. And you can learn more about that at workplacemasters.com.
Every employee has different mental health needs, from preventive behavioral health coaching to therapy and psychiatry. Ginger offers effective, convenient mental health care for any level of need, all from a smartphone. Learn more, visit ginger.com.
I want to stay on the diversity and inclusion kind of conversation for a bit. We know that diversity and inclusion is important to our workplace culture and equity in general. I wanted to ask if you could speak to the long-term benefits of DEI in business and how having a diverse team can drive performance.
Look, I believe strongly that diverse teams drive stronger business results. But, there are also studies out there that have proved this to be the case. So there's a couple of reports from McKinsey. There's a 2018 report from McKinsey Company, which found that highly gender diverse executive teams, so these would be, teams with equal or near equal representation of both men and women, are about 21% more likely to outperform on profitability. Another 2015 report from McKinsey found that companies that are in the top quartile of ethnic diversity are roughly 35% more likely to see financial performance above the national industry median. And so what do some of those statistics mean to me personally and mean to our business, and how kind of having a diverse team can drive performance? I'll give you an example of kind of our senior leadership team. So personally, I'm a member of our senior leadership team. I report to our CEO. I'm one of 3 women on the team of 10. So we're not quite to that 50% tile mark. We're about 33% of representation on the senior leadership team. In addition to that, I don't have children. I have 4 dogs. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm married to a great husband of 20 years, and he also has a really great and high demanding career. And I went to college and graduated from Drake University in Iowa. Our team, so that senior leadership team, is comprised of, parents and non-parents, men and women, a variety of different degrees. We live in different parts of the world. We have a couple of our colleagues from South Africa on our senior leadership team. So we bring a diverse backgrounds and experiences. Now, could we be more diverse? Absolutely. Like I said, we're 33% female. We have not enough representation when it comes to different race and ethnicity. But I believe that even a diverse team like ours, that our dialogue as a team is enhanced because of our differences, right? So we all offer differing viewpoints based upon our identities and our past experiences, and that ultimately helps as we talk about business strategy, or we talk about challenges that we're facing in the near and short term, or near and far term. Those differing identities and past experiences bubble up, and it helps us as a team to mitigate call it a groupthink mindset that can happen when you don't have a diverse team and everyone kind of is thinking the same way.
I appreciate you being so honest and open in sharing, like you said earlier, that you're at the relatively beginning stages of this journey, and a lot of VPs of HR and organizations are at the beginning stages, and it is a process that you just don't wake up tomorrow, attend a training, and then the next day you're suddenly, 50% female and male in your executive leadership team. It takes time and a commitment and a real focus to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a journey, and a good one.
There are so many intangibles in our job in HR, and absolutely so many intangibles in the DEI side of things. How do you think we can use DEI metrics to help us do better?
Yeah. So I think for me, the most important part of DE&I metrics it's not the number itself, but it's the movement of those numbers over time. It's the journey, right? So as with any metric, it's more about kind of the story that those metrics help us to understand than necessarily the number itself. So can we look at not just what's today's percentage of, Black, Indigenous, people of color representation at the company, but what was it 12 months ago? What is it 6 months ago? How is our candidate pipeline looking on the front end? And then are we seeing any trends in relation to retention that's specific to certain race or ethnic groups? And so it's using that data to then understand where we might be falling short and dig into that data, talk with our business partners, talk with employees, right, who are coming or leaving the company to understand where we might have maybe inclusion gaps or equity gaps that we need to address. The other thing just to say is, so for a company like ourselves, small, 200 employees, HR and DE and I tend to get, we're lumped together. We don't have a one singular person who is focused on DE and I. It's across the business. With larger companies, for companies who are large enough to have kind of a leader of DE and I, it's really that partnership with HR and talent acquisition that's really crucial, because I think it's ultimately policies and programs that are implemented in partnership with a leader of DE&I that have to be supported by the business and leadership at large, which then start to move the needle. And then I'll just say as well, for me, I like looking at metrics because for me, it is hard to really change what you don't measure and what you don't know.
That's so true. Otherwise, we're just walking around with a blindfold or blinders on.
Yep.
I've had a lot of conversations lately, and I feel like the theme has been about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I was thinking about this in relation to leadership. What is your approach to this when you're working with business leaders?
So I love this question. I'm going to share a personal story with you to kind of share how I think about this. So a couple of years ago, I participated in a panel discussion of senior women leaders. This was at my current company at FM Systems. It was part of our company's GROW employee resource group. And so GROW stands for Growing Relationships and Opportunities for Women. And so at the time that I was on the panel, I was definitely kind of the more junior person on the panel. And I made the comment afterwards to one of our, it was actually one of our male VPs, that I really wasn't comfortable with public speaking and that I was completely outside of my comfort zone in that situation. And his comment back to me was something that really kind of struck me, and to this day I remember, which was something about don't ever say that what you're doing is outside of your comfort zone. You might be stretching, but it's not outside your comfort zone. And I think his point was that being uncomfortable is okay, and it's not just okay, it's really essential in order to grow your career as a leader, right? So it kind of made me think about, as I was preparing for our podcast conversation today, it kind of made me think about how, there are statistics out there about how men, will more regularly apply to roles, to posted roles where they don't check all the boxes with qualifications, but women will tend to not. And, part of that, I think, is what's holding women back, the fact of being uncomfortable, that maybe we're just not quite as comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so really since that time, I've challenged myself to not shy away from uncomfortable conversations, and really have counseled other leaders to do the same across the business, right? We can't truly affect change within an organization if we can't push some of those uncomfortable conversations. And then as well, we ourselves can't really grow as leaders if we're not comfortable being uncomfortable, or even if we're uncomfortable being uncomfortable, we still have to do it.
True. I've taken inspiration from my daughter. She's 12, and it's been a lot for her. She's taking doing virtual school for the second year this year, but she's really thriving. But then I think about, I keep sticking her in these, camps and classes and situations where she doesn't know anyone, and she just goes. And I think we can learn a lot from, the example that you mentioned. And like my daughter, like she just does it and makes friends and learns something along the way.
Absolutely.
No podcast during COVID would be complete without the kind of general question we all want to know. What does return to office look like for you and your company?
Yes. So love this question, because it gives me an opportunity to not just chat about kind of what we're doing as a company, but also re-promote the company as well. But so at present, the majority of our workforce does continue to work remotely. And, to be frank, right, over the course of the pandemic, we as a company made this strategic business decision to hire across the United States as well as the United Kingdom, and not limit kind of our talent pool to locations that were in or near our physical office building. So in the States, we have a physical office building in Raleigh, North Carolina, and one in Traverse City, Michigan. And then we have one in Blackburn in the United Kingdom. And so now as we look at those physical office workspaces across the globe, we are working through what that hybrid office looks and means to us and our employees. So it's important, because we are now kind of a fairly distributed workforce. It's important that we create opportunities for all employees to meet and collaborate in person in a meaningful way. And so, that might mean getting teams together at a physical office site once a month or once a quarter. We're still working through kind of what that really looks like for each team. And that would mean, yes, employees who are kind of not close to an office, that they'd travel to an office, fly to an office. For employees who are near to a physical office space, the need or desire to go to the office might be driven by who else is working in the office that day, what types of tasks does the employee have scheduled for that day, and then is there a comfortable space available for that type of work that the employee wants to do that day. So those are all things that we are working on and thinking about, but basically, we strongly believe in kind of two things, and those two things are the power of in-person communication, connection, and team building. So we know that there is power in that in-person collaboration. We just came out of our offsite leadership team meeting, and we accomplished, I think, a lot more in person over 2 days than we would have kind of over Zoom calls. At the same time, we also believe strongly in the flexibility for our employees so that they can live kind of their best lives outside of work as well. So I view this kind of as a great challenge for us to kind of work through right now, and in particular because it's something that really all of our customers and all of our prospects are dealing with right now. And, I love that as a company, our technology really helps support companies during this really huge change in the dynamics of the office environment.
Deb, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. I love all the insights and wisdom that you've shared. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about FM Systems and the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check out the company at fmsystems.com. And then you can also check me out if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am Deb Hill, recruiter on LinkedIn.
We will link to Deb's LinkedIn profile, FM Systems website, and their careers page. I don't know what kind of openings you have, but if you're in the HR recruiting space and you're like, I want to be a part of Deb's team, if she has an opening, head on over there and apply.
Absolutely. Yes. Great plug, Jessica. I actually got 2 openings right now. So a recruiter role and a HR operations role. So
awesome. Well, I didn't know that I was going to become a staffing firm with this podcast, but hey, if it helps connect you with amazing HR leaders, then my fees are very inexpensive. So
perfect.
I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's really interesting to delve into how a role like the CHRO, whose experiences connects them to strategy and operations of the overall business. The CHRO doesn't just lead HR within the company. The company depends on the leadership of this role to set standards and benchmarks for everything from manager training to company culture to employee engagement and connection. I appreciate Deb taking the time to talk with us today. Her honest openness and willingness to share, particularly around the company's DEI journey, I think is really unique. And this is exactly what I wanted from the CHRO series when we started it at the beginning of the pandemic, is that I wanted real conversations from real HR leaders to share where they are, what they are doing, and what's happening, like what's working. And I believe Deb has done that for us today. I also want to thank you for listening to the Workology podcast. It is sponsored by Upskill HR and ACE the HR exam. This podcast is part of our CHRO series, and it is powered by Ginger.com and new manager training at workplacemasters.com. The podcast itself is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. My name is Jessica Miller-Merrell, and until next time, you can visit Workology.com to listen to all our Workology podcast episodes. Personal and professional development is essential for successful HR leaders. Join Upskill HR to access live training, community, and over 100 on-demand courses for the dynamic leader. HR Research credits available. Visit upskillhr.com for more.